Hello, film fans. Welcome to another brief video. I'm going to be discussing the Cold War, a brief history. Again, this is in conjunction with the 1950s, our Cold War nuclear age unit. So I'm going to go over some of the highlights of that era and point out some things that you need to know in order to set up the context for what we are watching with our 1950s Cold War and nuclear age films. All right, so first of all, the origins of the Cold War, they pretty much date back from 1947 to 91. The Cold War, to define it, is state of military and political tension between the United States and its allies versus the Soviet Union and its allies. Now, as usual, this is the video version of my PowerPoints. I do include links that you can click on the PowerPoint version. I would highly recommend that you do that. It's just going to give you a lot more information and detailed information on all of the topics here. Philosophical differences also led to the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States. It reached back in the 1920s, and a lot of this had to do with, of course, communism, state-controlled economy, totalitarian dictatorship controlling all aspects of society, and the United States, which was free enterprise, a capitalistic type economy, which of course allows democracy, freedom, choice, freedom of elections, open elections, and the Soviets and their allies are commonly referred to as the Eastern powers, where you have the U.S. and its allies commonly referred to as the Western powers. You'll hear those terms once in a while. Okay. Remember that both were allies during World War II, but not truly friends. Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union, and Adolf Hitler, leader of Germany, they were allies at the beginning of the war, but then, of course, Hitler turns his back on the Soviets, invades, and then, of course, the enemy of our enemy is our friend, and so Stalin and the Soviet Union joined the Allies during World War II. But that ends pretty abruptly at the end of World War II. All right, now on this next slide, I have a crash course video explaining a lot of the topics. I highly recommend that you watch this video. Get on there. They're fast, they're entertaining, they're to the point, and it really does a great overview of all the topics. I can't recommend the crash course videos enough. All right, I'm not going to play it here, but you can go back to the PowerPoint and play it. I think it's really helpful. All right, well, one of the things mentioned in the crash course video is, of course, the Iron Curtain. Now, I provide you here with a map. Remember that the Iron Curtain is not a real curtain, nor is it a real wall. But it's an imaginary line. And if you look at my mouse here, basically it was dividing communist Soviet Union and its allies from Western democracy, the United States and its allies. So it really was a dividing line. All right. So in Fulton, Missouri, not too far from Columbia, Missouri, Winston Churchill gives this speech, okay, and basically he attacks the Soviet Union for creating an Iron Curtain. And the term reflected Churchill's belief that communism had created a sharp division in Europe, all right? It was kind of a drop the mic moment because once he gave that speech, pretty much everyone listened as if, wow, this could be a real problem. Again, I give you a link on the Iron Curtain. Go check that out. Now, from the Soviet perspective, Stalin believed that the Iron Curtain was necessary to protect the Soviet Union from Western attacks. Remember, from Stalin's perspective, he had been attacked from not only invaders pre-World War II, but also with Hitler and the Nazi army during World War II. So from Stalin's perspective, he's using his satellite nations and his allies as a buffer zone to keep another invasion from happening. All right, so Stalin uses Churchill's words to help persuade his people that the United States and Great Britain were their enemies. All right, he also uses this as an excuse to rebuild the military, and the Cold War is beginning, and of course an arms race begins. All right, so stopping the spread of communism, the United States and its allies used a policy of containment. Picture, if you will, like a jar. If you put something in the jar and you put the lid on it, it's contained. But if you put something in the jar and maybe leave the lid off, you can imagine whatever it is kind of getting out of the jar and spreading across a room or something. So what the United States was going to do is it was going to help weaker nations in Europe to avoid falling to communism by giving them economic aid, giving them sanctions on trades, giving them military aid. So if you're a weaker country, don't succumb to communism. We will help you. We'll help you rebuild. We'll help you with your economy. And that was one of the policies of the United States and its allies, was to contain communism by helping other smaller nations resist it through economic aid and military aid. Remember that China had also fallen to communism under leader Mao Zedong. And even before World War II, China was a communist nation with some communist rebels. They had their own civil war going on. And of course, during the time Japan attacks China, China was somewhat of an ally of ours. You know, all this was kind of put on hold during World War II. After World War II, China falls to communist under leader Mao Zedong. And now Americans see this as an increasing communist threat to the U.S. because you have two huge nations, China and Russia, Soviet Union, now a communist threat. All right, so of course, as it says here, the Soviets get atomic weapons. Remember, we used atomic weapons at the end of World War II to force Japan to surrender, but now the Soviets have the bomb. All right, Truman announces they have the bomb. It's a shock to the nation. It causes fear and paranoia. And now we begin strengthening our military, which again builds up that arm race. All right, so 50 to 53, you've got the Korean War, the first true test of the Cold War. Korean War begins when communist North Korea invades democratic South Korea. You can kind of see this map here where you've got that dividing line at the 38th parallel. All right, the United Nations with the United States as a principal force came to the aid of South Korea. China, with assistance from the Soviet Union, came to the aid of North Korea. Again, great video here. Please play it. Check it out. The Cold War in Asia. It just kind of piggybacks on that other video. Can't highly recommend these enough. All right, so there's Korea. Remember, back home, you've got the communist witch hunt here. A group created the House Un-American Activities Committee. They started to investigate those that were accused of being a communist and possibly communists being in public office. All right, and then of course you have Joseph McCarthy, the famed senator who led what was known as the witch hunt, the communist witch hunt. Okay, and you know, because of his tactics, the term McCarthyism was created. All right, so you're going to hear that a lot. Again, video, check it out. Great, precise, to the point, tells you a lot about Joseph McCarthy and that fear that was caused from his communist witch hunt. Remember, if you're a communist, you were scared of him. If you were not a communist, you were still probably scared of him because you could have been accused of being a communist, and just being accused was almost as bad. All right, so how this spills over into Hollywood is some Hollywood filmmakers, known as the Hollywood 10, are accused of being communists or communist sympathizers. They're brought into Congress. They refuse to answer the questions, and as a result of that, they're blacklisted. Basically, you can't get a job in Hollywood. People don't want to associate themselves with you because once they do, they may be accused of being a communist. Again, check out this short video. Can't recommend these videos enough. I'm going to say it over and over again. Check out the short videos. It'll give you some background and a little bit of more in-depth information about that. So there's that Hollywood connection. Of course, there were some spy cases. Agler Hiss, convicted of being a spy for the Soviets. Claude Fuchs, Manhattan Project scientist. Remember, that's the atomic bomb creation. And he was accused of giving information to the Soviets. And then you have the married couple of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. They were convicted of passing secrets to the Soviets, and they were executed. It was really a hot topic at the time, widely covered in the press. And that was pretty much a big deal. Check those out. Again, links to look at those in more detail. All right, so now the hydrogen bomb is created. And remember, that's 100 times more powerful than the atomic bomb. The stakes are raised. We up the ante because now we have the hydrogen bomb and the arms race begins. The Soviets successfully tested an H-bomb in August of 1953, elevating the fear of the nuclear threat, creating, again, the arms race. So check that out. All right. Obviously, new weapons are created. Technology such as nuclear submarines, nuclear power plants, smaller size nuclear bombs, Air Force bombers are constantly on the move, ready to strike whenever needed. And then, of course, you have Soviet advances in technology. Sputnik is released, the satellite. That worries the United States. Are they winning the space race? Well, it seems that they were. And Americans were a little worried that the Soviets were surpassing our technology. All right, so again, Sputnik, you can check that out. I believe they talk about that in that crash course video, so hopefully you've already seen it. Americans' reaction to the threat of nuclear war, remember, our government had to do something to prepare us. And the best that they did is duck and cover. This video is great. This is a original video that was shown to kids. It was shown to people during the time on how to prepare for a nuclear attack. You duck and cover. Again, it might seem ridiculous today, but at the time, they needed some type of preparation for some nuclear emergencies. Check out the duck and cover. It's great. Bert the Turtle. It was basically a slogan. Just like today, we've got the Homeland Security that is telling us what to do as far as terrorist attacks. It's the same thing back then. Here's some kids getting ready for a drill, preparing for attack. Here's a bomb shelter, which you've heard about. People preparing, making bomb shelters so they can live there for weeks or months at a time if there was nuclear fallout from an attack. All right, it's also important to check out some pulp culture. Check out this link, it's pretty good. It goes through just 50s pulp culture. You got Elvis and James Dean, Bill Haley in the comments, Marlon Brando. By the way, these two guys kind of started the biker kind of greaser culture from the 1950s. If you see kids like in jean jackets and white t-shirts and leather jackets as well, that was kind of that culture started by these two guys. Twilight Zone was popular, Mad Magazine, there's your culture. And of course, kind of the scope and the focus of this class, you've got movies and comic books that were inspired by the Cold War. Them, I Married a Communist, there's the Godzilla film, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So you can see how this was, Hollywood and entertainment was influenced by the Cold War. All right, guys, so just to wrap it all up, quickly, this all leads to the Red Scare, fear of communism, McCarthyism. Remember that the real-life spy cases led to films focusing on espionage, spying, secret double agents like James Bond films, spy gadgets and technologies. Nuclear weapons and fallout led to films focusing on war, destruction, mutated creatures, and giant monsters attacking cities. In other words, like nuclear fallout, what did it do to wildlife? And it would spawn these creatures, mutated creatures. And then, of course, Sputnik and new space technology. And by the way, the 1947 UFO Roswell, New Mexico incident. Check that out. Click on that link. If you're not familiar with that, it kind of started the whole UFO craze. All right, so that's it. That's the end of this brief introduction to the Cold War. Check it out. And yeah, remember, all of our themes revolve around fear and paranoia. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and good luck making your way through the Cold War unit.